Today, we're doing something a little different. We're putting faith itself under the microscope. We're going to dive into what happens when objects of really profound religious belief get subjected to the cold, hard, impartial analysis of modern science.
So, that's the big question for this explainer, isn't it? What happens when you take a claim of something supernatural and hand it over to the world of forensic science? We're going to follow the evidence from a whole series of cases that have left investigators scratching their heads for decades.
Okay, so our story kicks off in Lanciano, Italy. This artifact, which dates all the way back to the 8th century, is believed by many to be a genuine miracle. For hundreds of years, it was just an object of faith, but recently, it became Exhibit A in a much, much wider scientific investigation.
And that is the absolute key here. This isn't just about one old relic. The source material we're looking at details how scientists, often working completely independently of each other, analyzed multiple separate incidents all across the globe, and when they started comparing their notes, a really startling and consistent pattern started to pop up.
I mean, just look at this timeline. The cases stretch from medieval Italy all the way to modern Poland, from Argentina to Mexico. We are talking about totally different cultures, different centuries, and different continents, all reportedly producing bizarrely similar physical evidence. And that's the pattern that really got the investigators' attention.
All right, before we go any further, we need a super quick biology lesson. I promise it's important. A key term that you're going to hear over and over again in these scientific reports is myocardium. Basically, that's just the fancy name for the heart's muscle tissue, the stuff that does the pumping. It looks incredibly unique under a microscope, so remember that word? Myocardium.
And here we go, this is the first bombshell from the investigation. In all 5 of those cases we just saw, from the 8th century relic to the samples from the 21st century, the scientific conclusion was exactly the same. The substance was human heart tissue, not animal tissue, not some kind of mold, but human myocardium.
But wait, it gets even more specific. The analysis didn't just identify what the tissue was, it revealed the condition it was in. And in every single case, the heart tissue showed signs of being under extreme stress. We're talking inflammation, a massive number of white blood cells rushing to an injury site, and damage to the muscle fibers themselves. The reports all consistently describe a heart that has gone through something truly traumatic.
To put that into perspective, a top-tier cardiologist, Professor Frederick Zagibe, was asked to examine the sample from Buenos Aires. Now, crucially, they gave him the tissue blind. He had no idea what he was looking at or where it came from. His immediate, unfiltered assessment was that it looked like the heart of someone who had suffered a massive physical trauma, like in a car crash or a severe beating.
Okay, this is where the story takes a turn that, according to the source, just completely defies biological explanation. The Buenos Aires sample, right? It was kept in distilled water for over 3 years. Distilled water is known to destroy cells, it makes them burst. Yet, when they looked, it contained living, intact white blood cells. And it's a similar story in the Tixla sample, where scientists actually photographed a living white blood cell in action. These cells should have been dead and decomposed in minutes, not years.
But the anomalies didn't stop with living cells. You know, the next logical step in any modern forensic investigation is to run a DNA analysis. And this is where the mystery deepens into what the source itself calls a paradox.
So normally, forensic scientists can pull DNA out of a sample and generate a unique genetic profile. It's like a biological fingerprint. In these cases, the lab reports confirmed, yep, there's human DNA here. But when they tried to actually create a profile, they hit a wall. Over and over again, they failed. The DNA was there, but for some reason, it was completely unprofilable.
Now this led one of the main investigators, a guy named Dr. Ricardo Castañón, to a pretty wild conclusion. He started to see this consistent failure not as a problem, but as a data point in itself. He actually claims this recurring inability to get a profile acts as a kind of control variable, suggesting the DNA itself is somehow of a supernatural origin.
So the investigation then started to widen its scope, connecting these modern samples to some of history's most famous, and let's be honest, controversial relics. The researchers started looking for some kind of common thread that could tie them all together.
And that thread, believe it or not, turned out to be blood type. Specifically, blood type AB. Now, you might not know this, but AB is one of the rarest blood types on the entire planet. So finding it in multiple unrelated places is statistically, well, it's pretty significant.
So check this pattern out. The source tells us that the ancient relic from Lanciano tested as type AB, okay? The modern sample from Tixla, also type AB. But then, they compared these results to two other legendary artifacts, the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium of Oviedo. And what do you know? Both have also been identified as containing type AB blood. That is 4 completely distinct relics, separated by centuries and by geography, all reportedly sharing the exact same rare blood type.
Now, just to understand the broader context of where this information is coming from, it's worth noting that the source material doesn't just limit itself to forensics. It also explores other, let's say, more speculative theories that definitely challenge mainstream science. We're just going to touch on one of these alternative ideas for a moment.
For example, the source suggests some alternative explanations for these huge, large-scale historical events, and it connects them to what it describes as unseen environmental factors.
So, this particular theory suggests that there are these invisible telluric energy fields, and when they get deharmonized or out of whack, it can cause widespread psychological distress and conflict in humans. The source even theorizes that this might explain why so many civilizations have just erupted into war right before major cataclysms.
Okay, but let's circle back to our central investigation. After all the forensic tests were run and all the lab reports were in, the scientists were left with a series of findings that, according to the source, really push the very limits of what science can currently explain.
So let's just recap this whole conundrum. The finding? It's human heart tissue that has suffered immensely. The paradox? It somehow contains living cells years after it should have turned to dust. The finding? A super rare blood type, AB, links multiple historically separate relics. The paradox? Its human DNA is definitely there, but you can't get a profile from it. You see, every single scientific fact is paired with a giant, unexplained mystery. Dr. Franco Serafini, who is a primary source for this explainer, he calls the whole thing a short circuit of human reason. He argues that while our scientific instruments clearly confirm a biological reality, these are living tissues. Those very same instruments are powerless to explain how this reality is even possible.
And that leaves us with a final, really challenging question. The whole argument being presented here is that our own scientific tools have uncovered facts that seem to violate the known laws of biology. So if that's true, what does it tell us about the limits of our own understanding and what might lie just beyond the boundaries of what we think we know?